Welcome back to the Crossroad Diner, that place your spirit goes when you've got a sense it might be time to change direction. We have a great example today. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Crossroad Diner. I'm Steve McCurdy, your host, and I've got a guest today that I am very fond of. I got to know this lady a couple of years ago, and I continue to be astounded by her faith, her energy, and her persistence. Please help me welcome to the Crossroad Diner, Cathy Parker. Welcome, Cathy.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me on. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
it's my joy and pleasure. As you can tell, she's a Yankee. She's from Cathy is a Southern girl through and just a delightful human being. Cathy, I got to know when I moved to this part of Georgia. As you can see behind her, South Georgia Studios on the backdrop there. And I met Cathy and her partner, Honey Korngold, and they were putting together development of production in South Georgia and teaching the young people of South Georgia the skills so that they could be crew. And as a result, some great things are happening. Can you give us just a little bit of an overview as to what's going to happen this summer?
Okay. Steve, it changes rapidly, but I think when we started, and I know that we met you not very long after we had set roots in South Georgia, as far as Honey Korngold bringing her production company, Cinevantage, and then us starting our nonprofit, which is called Philanthro Films.
Right.
Our whole thing was, okay, Georgia is such a hotbed for film, and most of that is done in the metropolitan areas. And here we are in South Georgia. We have wonderful people. We have communities that absolutely need economic development. We have youth that need to be able to pursue film and stay in their communities and not
Right.
have to move out of state or to the Atlanta area. And we need this for our community. So we started Philanthro Films as a way to bring up the workforce, to educate, to get the community involved, to partner with the educational systems, with high schools, colleges, technical schools, and your local businesses, to be able to build a community that film can flourish just like it does in other parts of the state. So it was a big challenge in that you're starting something from scratch, but we've been able to have a lot of progress with our film camps, which you've been involved with for the last 2 summers, and having youth to be able to be a part of this, to learn what it's like to create a film.
Yes.
And maybe it's working with the lighting and grip, maybe it's working with the cameras, maybe it's working in
Post-production, all of it. Yeah.
all that's involved with it from start to finish, for them to realize, wow, I really enjoyed this. I really can prosper. And I know you and I have laughed at the one young man that came in, and he left with a notepad just full of notes. And I heard him talking to another student that was in film camp and saying, I took notes today. I haven't taken notes in years. And I said, well, let me look at your notes. And he had like 4 or 5 pages of notes. And I said, well, why'd you take so many notes today if you're not a note taker? And he said, well, I finally heard something worth writing down. And so that makes you see that you're definitely hitting on something that is touching the hearts and the minds of these young people that want to be a part of an industry. And we need them. And we need people our age too,
That's right.
and people that are older. So it's not limited. And we're seeing people that are in, their second or third careers, saying, well, I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to use this creativity for this or that, and just having that opportunity. So I think every time I sort of get it into a where I'm able to talk about it and put it into this like feasible. It just sort of morphs from that. And then I'm like, well, it's bigger than I thought. It's bigger than I thought. So
Well,
now we're,
you're not unaccustomed to God doing that with you, though.
oh, no, no. Yeah.
One of the things that I've always I'd heard the story about Cathy having this idea and developing it and moving and running with it, and then I listened to the audiobook version of her book, Northern Lights, and
Yeah.
I have not cried every 8 or 10 minutes as often in a book that wasn't some sort of a tearjerker. I have a theory that we are never happier than when we see someone we love get a win.
Yeah.
And that your book is full of those moments of
Mhm.
somebody else having a tiny victory, and all of us, even the reader who doesn't know them at all, getting this
Right.
overwhelming sense that that there's a great future for all of us, and that the great possibilities. Our show, The Crossroad Diner, is about that moment when you're crouching through life on your own agenda, and something goes and pulls you into something you didn't expect.
Mhm.
Certainly, that's what happened with you. Now, can you just give us a little bit of a sketch about the story that you saw that
Mhm.
attracted your attention that led to the Northern Lights journey?
Okay. Absolutely. So the story, Northern Lights, took place back in 2007. We were living in Jacksonville, Florida. My husband, former professional football player, turned coach. He was coaching high school ball. All three of our sons were playing high school ball. Our daughter, our youngest, was extremely involved in sports. In fact, she still is today as a coach on the collegiate level
Oh
in
my!
softball. But the story that we saw that grabbed us and shifted our direction was an ESPN Outside the Lines story on a very remote Alaskan village that had a lot of social problems in their kids not wanting to go to school. Um, so the dropout rate was really high. The drug use, the alcoholism,
Mm-hmm.
and just waywardness, a lack of hope. And they had started in this community, they had gotten a grant from the Department of Education from the state to implement something that would be a way to attract kids, to get them involved in school, to get them to attend school. And they started a football program. And it was extremely problematic because football had never been played that far north before. They didn't have the facility to be able to do that. It's the tundra. It's not, you can't grow grass there.
Right.
So they were playing on gravel, a gravel field that the hash marks and yard lines were lined by flour. And
Which was the only thing soft to fall on that field. Yeah.
well, uh, they don't have stores where you can go buy field paint and stuff
Right.
like that, So flour seemed to be a good idea. I later learned when we started talking to them about putting an artificial turf field in, and explaining to them what that looked like. And I'll never forget them saying, "Oh, that's awesome!" Because when we use the flour, the birds will come and take our pebbles that are covered in the flour away. So,
It's a,
having all that sewn into a field was
yeah.
was pretty cool for them.
Well,
But so yeah, so that was the story. The story
right.
was we were putting in an artificial turf field in our community in Jacksonville, Florida, and the Lord just really put it on my heart of, if you need this in Florida, then how much more would do they need it in an area where they cannot grow grass? And so I had this crazy idea of, we could raise the funds to do that. We could raise the funds to give that community an artificial turf field, and we could teach their young people how to play the game of football. And
And teach their coaches how to coach football.
yeah, we can do that. And
Sure.
and I'll never forget my oldest son saying to me when I announced it to the family, and he said, "Mom," he said, "that's impossible. That place has no roads going into it." And he was so right. It was an impossible thing, but that was one of the things that I learned, Steve, is that people want to be a part of something that is much bigger than themselves. And like you
Right.
said, you can choose to live in this world two ways. You can live in this world where you are, trying to satisfy yourself and at all times, or you can live in this world of, God put me here and put me here to serve Him and serve others, and how can I be of service? So that was a big step in stepping out and making a public announcement, that because I knew that it wouldn't be accepted by everyone. And
Right.
and and anytime that you start on something that's a big vision, um, um, Maxwell John Maxwell says it best in one of his books. He said, people will say that big vision unites, but I'm here to tell you it does not. It divides those who will from those who will not. And I wrote that down when I read that in John Maxwell's book, and I've circled it and circled it and circled it to understand that not everybody's going to think it's a good idea. And you're going to get a lot of lash, backlash from it, but you got to be prepared for that, because,
Well, but
uh,
that brings into your mind a question of, am I being called, or is this my ego that's driving
yeah,
me toward this?
yeah,
Is this,
right.
why am I what is my real motive here for doing this? And as those obstacles mount, that question gets bigger and bigger and bigger each time. But
Hmm.
you also had the situation where everybody loved the idea, or a lot of people loved the idea, wanted to get on board, but they too are facing these moments of challenge and objection, and
Hmm.
they too are going, are we doing the right thing here? Is this even doable? Are we going to
Yeah,
be humiliated by the fact that we had this great vision and then we can't
yeah.
get it done?
I think that's the biggest risk. The biggest risk is, what if it fails? Am I going to take the risk knowing that, there is a strong, you know, likelihood that it may fail?
Hmm.
And there's,
Well,
and that,
let me
that's the part that a lot of people don't want to do. They don't want
right,
to fail. And so it's safer not to try
right,
than to risk.
right. Now,
But
when
but
people
when you do, but when you
Don't get
do,
ahead of ourselves here. When listening to this, you go, okay, yeah, let's get a field put in up there. And there's only 2 months a year when the ships come in and can offload
Mhm.
things, and
Yeah,
there are no roads. Everything gets there,
yeah,
including the flour, gets
yeah,
there by boat or by plane.
yeah.
So that's pretty expensive flour. I mean, that flour's been on a journey to end up, you know,
Yes. Oh,
being
yes.
lines on a football field. So
Yeah,
you think about that, and I know that you talked with one of the people that got behind you was the owner of the Jaguars,
yeah.
and at one point he said to you, as I recall from the book, "Yeah, Cathy, these things, it takes a couple of years to get something like this done." Now they were going to lose that program after its inaugural season,
Hmm.
and so you had to get this done in what length of time?
Before football season began, and
That
so,
year,
yeah, yeah.
that
So,
season.
that season.
So you had
Hmm.
all of 2 months that things could happen, and you were
Yeah,
coming up on those 2 months,
yeah.
and it all had to get put together in that length of
Right,
time. And
right.
nobody was confident about the doability of that.
Yeah.
Um, and yet it happened. And if you go on Google Earth and zoom in to
Uh-huh.
Barrow, Alaska, there
Hmm.
is a bright blue rectangle between a lake and the Arctic Ocean, that is there on which
Yeah.
they play football
Yeah.
now.
Mhm. Yeah.
So here's the Crossroad Diner is about that place where you come into those questions. You have a notion come into your mind that where you need to go is over there. And you can't even begin to see the obstacles that you're going to meet, but you know that they're going to be there.
Mhm.
In your case, and I know that it's all through the book, you've already alluded to it, you had moments of doubt, you had moments of concern
Mhm.
about its doability, and particularly when the objections are coming from the dinner table at your house,
Yeah.
uh, that's
Yeah.
tough too. That's very lonely.
Yeah.
But you felt a calling.
Mhm. Yeah.
Talk to us about those dark moments.
Yeah, and when you are, we had 4 teenagers,
Yeah,
and so, they're in a time of their life where they just want mom to be normal, you know? They don't want mom doing crazy things, you know?
right.
And, um, and so that was a little difficult to know what I was putting at risk. And and yeah, there came so many times when it was so done, and everybody around me that I respected, that I knew cared about me, but they were saying, at some point you just have to realize that it can't be done. And I do remember just getting so angry with the Lord, and just saying, Lord, why would you tell me to do something that you knew I could not do, that you knew, you know, wasn't feasible. And I can remember just being so angry,
Mm,
and just hurt, that I would be so humiliated. And not just that, but not just with my family and my friends, but um, even in my career, um, with um, some things that I felt were would probably happen with the credibility issues,
right.
those
It would be
things.
a very visible failure in a
Yeah,
salesperson's life
yeah,
to try to
yeah,
sell an idea
yeah,
internationally or
yeah.
over this
Uh-huh.
vast an
So,
area.
but I did go through those moments, and one night particular, and I just remember even through the night, the Lord just putting in my heart, I gave you the vision and I'll give you the faith to see it through. And I woke up that next morning more determined than ever. And I didn't still know how it was going to happen, but I just knew it was. And so I went forward and ended up just getting some people on the phone from the area in that remote village, some of the Alaskan natives, and just sharing my heart with them. And a lot of the times, a lot of the mis conceptions that we have and misunderstandings, they're just because we don't communicate. And I always think if you can just really show who you are and your motive and your
Mhm.
heart on something. And so that's what I did when I finally got them on the phone. Is I just explained who I was. I was just a football mom, a coach's wife, and a working woman that believed that if you sowed into these youth, and that if you provided them with this sport that had made such a difference in my family and so many others that I had seen through the years, I believed it could help. And just what it had done for us and who we were. And it was during that call that those elders of that community, those Inupiat um, men, said, "You know what? We're. It's time. It's time
Yeah,
to make a decision that we're going to come all in." And they came all in to help
right.
me and give me everything that I needed to see the project through. So, just to sort of wrap it up, for the audience, an artificial turf field is about well. what we transported was about 650,000 pounds of products that we sent by every transportation you can imagine. They were picked up by semis and put on train and put and taken to the West Coast and put on barges and put on planes and into a place that has no roads going into it. We brought the team to Florida. They stayed in our homes. They went through spring practice with our team,
Well, I wanted
and
to
we did a
hang on
go
a
ahead.
second. I wanted I want the this was not about a football field. I mean, it started to be out to be a football field. The
Yeah,
hook was the football field.
yeah,
But what the football program was initially created because they wanted to engage the kids
yeah,
in their community.
right.
So the extension of that is a field to play on.
Yeah,
The obstacle, of course, is the logistics of all that.
yeah.
And that became the obstacle of doability. And I don't want to try anything that I'm not going to succeed at. But part of the program, and I didn't know this at all until I got through the audiobook. I'd heard the amazing stories about the
Hmm.
field.
Yeah.
What moved me to tears was that the coaches and the team were brought to Jacksonville to work with your kids, their coaches, in an environment that they had very foreign to them. This walking on the grass was an incredible experience for some of them. But that's one of the things that transferred that faith, hope, and commitment to your kids was working with those kids, living in your home with a couple of the kids, and one on one, those relationships and um, that bonding turned them around as I heard it
Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
tape.
Yeah.
So being a part of something bigger than yourself has an incredible power. And not everybody that's on our show is a person of faith. So many are. I am concerned about the folks who don't have a training in that area. And when they get into that dark night of the soul, they got nobody to go say, "Hey, help me." They might have somebody with skin on, but they don't have that spiritual
Yeah.
infusion. Um, so I mean, this has gone so quickly. I know that you can talk readily to persons of faith. What do you say to your friends, your kids' friends, to the folks that we run into in the community who have those kinds of fears when they don't have that foundation? What encouragement can you give them that they're more capable than they think they are, and if there's a voice saying this to them, that they need to listen to it?
Okay. Well, one of the things that is probably grieves me the most is to hear someone who maybe they've had a vision or a dream, but they've never acted on it.
All right.
And because of fear, because of, I'll never forget one time I was speaking at it was actually a church that was looking to start some big mission projects. And they asked me to come and tell my story. And I did. And I remember this elderly man coming up to me and saying, I felt like, God told me to do something, but because everyone else thought that it was a bad idea, I thought, well, that must not be God. And I can remember saying that was a good sign that it was. And then that church went on to do a whole lot of things. They started a soup kitchen and just all kinds of things. And I was thankful that I was able to show that even if it's very difficult and even if um, not everyone agrees, when you step out and you believe and you get others involved, and people do, they want to be a part. I mean, my story
Yes.
would have never happened by myself for sure.
No.
It was people coming up to me saying, I want to be a part of that. This is what I can offer. This is what I do. And it was, and the perfect team was built, from a logistics transportation and logistics to an Arctic architect, that came on board,
That was
from
baffling. That
Florida.
was,
I mean, are you
how
kidding
do you
me?
find an architect
Yeah,
yeah, in Florida
yeah.
that knows
And I,
about tundra building?
yeah, and just on and on and on of people that just heard the story, just ordinary people.
Yeah,
And that was the great thing too, is that ordinary people. It was ordinary people. When I first started the idea, I thought that I would get a big sporting goods company or,
yeah,
Nike, Under Armour. I thought somebody like that would want to run with this. I thought, okay, this is going to be easy. They're going to write a check for this. Didn't happen.
no,
It was just ordinary people, so ordinary people that can just come along and support somebody else's dream. Um, it just blows my mind that so many people gave to that project who will
right,
never, ever see that field in their lifetime,
right.
um, because it is a very difficult place to get to. And it wasn't for their children. It wasn't for their grandchildren. It was for someone else that they didn't even
And
know.
and that's my point. And yet they were uplifted
Yeah.
by being a part of uplifting kids whose lives will touch them, but they won't get to see it. I got a friend who calls that a crop report. We plant seeds all the time,
Yes.
and we don't get the crop report on the seeds that we planted or been a part of.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, Also, in our Western culture, we tend to look at anything in a decision making process with the who, what, when, where, why, and how,
Yeah.
and we can answer the who, what, when, where, and
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
It's the how that stops us all the
Yeah.
time, because
Hmm.
we have to jump into that thing without knowing all of the how. And that act of faith, you always have to have a leader who's got a faith in something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And you guys are tackling one this summer. We'll save those details maybe for later. Cathy Parker, thank you so much for sharing a little bit with us about the Northern Lights, but about what it takes to step out in faith and to try to make something happen when you cannot see the end of the tunnel.
Right. I enjoyed it. I always love sharing the story.
Yeah, I can tell, and it's always fun. I love to hear the story, and I always love to just be around your enthusiasm, because your hunger to suck the marrow out of life is always encouraging to me.
Okay. I'm going to have to write that one down.
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Crossroad Diner. Every week we talk to somebody who has tackled something that they didn't know that they could do anything about, because they wanted to move toward the higher self that they were created to be. This week it was Cathy Parker. We'll see who it is next week. Join us then. Let's find out. See you next time on the Crossroad Diner. You've been listening to the Crossroad Diner, that place where your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. Join us on Mondays for Crossroad coaching, and Thursday releases are always examples like this. Someone who went to the diner and made a great choice. See you next time.